The United States Coast Guard has 202 aircraft, fixed wing and rotary, used for search and rescue. While there's many parts of aviation that I find fascinating, search and rescue has definitely been at the top of that list for me for a very long time. I want to speak on aviation in terms of search and rescue, as well as firefighting capabilities, terms in aviation that are still involved with the military, just different uses than acts of war. The U.S. Coast Guard's fleet of has many different capabilities. Fixed wing aircraft being used in search and rescue have many different capabilities than rotary. There's high altitude capabilities, giving the aircraft and the searchers a better perspective of the search area. There's the general endurance of these aircraft used in these search efforts. They're able to go much further and for a lot longer of a time. They're also able to fly at speeds that helicopters are not capable of. They're also able to fly in equipment to locations that helicopters sometimes cannot reach. The U.S. Coast Guard specifically has a couple different aircrafts that they use for their search efforts, one being the HC-130. It is also used by the Air Force. However, the Coast Guard gave some of their HC-130s to the U.S. Forest Service to be converted into aerial fire retardant tankers. These HC-130s converted to fight wildfires are being replaced by the Coast Guard by the C-27. The HC-130 Hercules, used for Coast Guard search and rescue operations, has a crew of roughly 5 to 7 people, depending on the mission. Length is 97 feet 9 inches, while the wing area is 1,745 square feet. The max takeoff weight is 175,000 pounds, allowing a lot of room for equipment to be loaded on, as well as the fuel required for these long distance missions. There's a four-bladed propellers. The range on the HC-130 is 5,178 miles. So that max takeoff weight allows a lot of room for fuel to give it that long distance. The HC-144, or the Ocean Sentry, is a medium-range twin-engine turboprop. It's got 10 hours of endurance. It was used during the Deepwater Horizon operation to evacuate and impact wildlife and give that wildlife a chance to seek rehabilitation. The Ocean Sentry also responded in 2010 to the earthquake in Haiti that shook the country. The C-27, my personal favorite of the Coast Guard's fleet, is a medium military multi-purpose transport aircraft with short takeoff and landing capabilities. So it's able to get into locations that other planes that size normally aren't able to. The C-27J has the engines and avionics systems of the larger Lockheed C-130J Hercules, but due to its smaller size and twin-engine design, the C-27 is also known as the Baby Herc, which is a really awesome nickname. The Baby Herc performs drug and migrant interdiction, disaster response, and search and rescue missions. The Italian Air Force also adopted the C-27 and created a package called the Jamming and Electronic Defense Instrumentation, or the JEDI program. They publicized the ability of the aircraft in the disruption of radio communications, and in particular, remote detonators commonly used on improvised explosive devices. So the Italian Air Force is obviously using this aircraft in a much different capacity, but it's still extremely interesting, the overall capabilities and different missions that this aircraft can fulfill. The fixed wing missions for these Coast Guard aircraft include aids to navigation missions, allowing the plane's Minotaur system that was recently developed to precisely mark the location of aids to navigation or buoys and figure out whether or not they're in the right place so that they could be moved. This ability allows the aviation teams to get out to those positions a lot quicker than a boat normally would be able to. These planes are also used for interdiction of drugs and migrants. They're used for recon, and they're vast speed, altitude, the ability to scan wide areas, as well as the capabilities of the instruments they carry. This makes the Coast Guard's use of aircraft a perfect example of how aircraft can be used in the military in a non-destructive and rather helpful. Other countries also put this into practice. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority contracted a company called Leidos to provide Australia's national Tier 1 search and rescue response service. They utilize a fleet of Challenger 604 jet aircraft to cover Australia's vast search and rescue area, and the region that they cover is almost one-tenth of the entire Earth's surface. The company makes statements about how their mission is to minimize the loss of life, injury, property damage by delivering aid to persons in distress in maritime and land environments. They meet this responsibility on a 24/7 standard. They're constantly on standby, ready for calls, working with the Australian Maritime Safety Authority to ensure that no lives are lost under their watch. Their modified aircraft enhance airborne search and rescue tasks. They have faster response times, they extend their range, they're considerably longer presence in Australia's search and rescue region, further showing Australia and many other countries' adaptation and using aviation as a tool for these missions. The United States Coast Guard also uses their aviation department for Arctic missions, assisting in ice breaking, creating routes for these ships, and the difference between aircraft with fixed wing versus rotary. Fixed wing have much longer range. They have high speed surveys, whereas helicopter have slower surveys and much shorter range. Fixed wing can support up to 10 or more hours of flight time and missions. Helicopters are limited by their fuel and hover power, so their missions are going to be significantly shorter. The fixed wing is able to deliver a much larger amount of cargo. They can airdrop gear support and cover great distances with that support, whereas helicopters are, they can create situations where they're able to precisely hoist people up and rescue people in closer quarters. And then fixed wing aircraft are able to be equipped with FLIR and hyperspectral payloads, whereas helicopters usually have less sensors for these great distances. Fixed wing excels in search and reconnaissance, but helicopters excel in direct rescue. The Coast Guard is always looking to further their aviation capabilities. So the HC-130s are replacing the older fleets. Integration of Minotaur systems are completely changing how missions are able to be fulfilled. And those are being installed in the C-27Js as well as the HC-144s. The growth in the fixed wing community as far as unmanned and aerial vehicles continues to grow, and I don't think we're going to see that stop anytime soon. I hope to see fixed wing aircraft continue to be used as this resource for search and rescue, and I think that soon we're going to see more and more cases where it can be used for search and rescue as well as firefighting, as well as seeing more and more cases of agencies working together with fixed wing aircraft and furthering this technology as well as the capabilities of different search and rescue teams, whether they be through the state or federal, like the Coast Guard. The United States Coast Guard has 202 aircraft, fixed wing and rotary, used for search and rescue. While there's many parts of aviation that I find fascinating, search and rescue has definitely been at the top of that list for me for a very long time. I want to speak on aviation in terms of search and rescue, as well as firefighting capabilities, terms in aviation that are still involved with the military, just different uses than acts of war. The U.S. Coast Guard's fleet of has many different capabilities. Fixed wing aircraft being used in search and rescue have many different capabilities than rotary. There's high altitude capabilities, giving the aircraft and the searchers a better perspective of the search area. There's the general endurance of these aircraft used in these search efforts. They're able to go much further and for a lot longer of a time. They're also able to fly at speeds that helicopters are not capable of. They're also able to fly in equipment to locations that helicopters sometimes cannot reach. The U.S. Coast Guard specifically has a couple different aircrafts that they use for their search efforts, one being the HC-130, is also used by the